Imagine facing a six-figure fine tied to a mistake in your restaurant's employee handbook. That was the reality for the owner of 2 Philadelphia restaurants who had to pay over $800,000 in back wages and damages. According to the complaint, their handbook stated, "Restaurant does not pay overtime. Every extra hour will be paid as a regular salary." Your employee handbook isn't just for welcoming your team. It's your first line of legal defense. Hi, I'm Sam from 7 Shifts, an employee scheduling and payroll app for restaurants. According to a study we ran in 2023, the average tenure of a restaurant employee is just 110 days. In an industry with high turnover and unique wage laws, it's a risk to just use any old handbook and call it a day.
Before we get into it, I want to put out a quick disclaimer that every city, state, and country has different laws. So while we'll be talking about employee handbook best practices, the best way to protect yourself is to consult with legal experts before you share your handbook with employees.
So, why is it important to get your employee handbook right? Your employee handbook might be the most expensive stack of papers in your restaurant. Over on the West Coast, the city of Oakland made a restaurant pay $105,000 because of their policy on service charges. A former employee stated that the handbook said that half of the money from the service charge went to all restaurant workers to raise wages. However, in Oakland, only customer-facing workers can receive money from service fees. So that doesn't include back-of-house workers like dishwashers and line cooks. Not only does your handbook introduce new hires to your culture, values, and processes, but it can also be a reference for managers and operators when unfamiliar conflicts come up. Plus, it's often a non-negotiable. In some districts, you must have an employee handbook that outlines things like harassment, overtime, and sick policies. I spoke to Beth Schroeder, an employment and labor attorney in LA. Here are 5 mistakes you might be making in your restaurant's employee handbook. 1. You took your handbook from another restaurant. Your friend runs a bar over on 23rd Street. Can't you just take his handbook and change the names? Not exactly. Local laws vary drastically from city to city.
And you may not even realize that the city limits are across the street from you. West Hollywood here, I live down the street from West Hollywood, but I have within a mile of me, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and Los Angeles, and they all have different sick leave policies. So if you're borrowing from the restaurant that happens to be a block away, and it's in a different jurisdiction, you're using a sick leave policy that isn't legal. You either could be overpaying your employees or underpaying your employees.
2. You haven't updated your handbook in years. Legislation changes quickly. Look at what happened during the pandemic. Make sure to review or have a professional review your handbook every year. If you make significant changes, your employees will need to re-sign those pages.
Most of the time, we're updating our handbooks once a year, maybe once every other year. Most laws go into effect at the beginnings of years. Every now and then we'll get a significant case that comes down that requires a change mid-year.
3. Your handbook is in English, but an employee primarily speaks another language. States like California require policies to be written in languages that your employees regularly speak. Considering that there are 3 million immigrants who work in the hospitality industry in the US, take extra care to make sure that your team members can read the handbook. Even if you don't live in one of the states like Tennessee, Texas, or Colorado that requires translation, your employees can't follow guidelines they don't understand.
Make sure that those policies are distributed in a language that we know our employees communicate. So giving out an employee handbook with an English-only arbitration agreement isn't going to do any good with employees who only speak Mandarin or Spanish.
4. Your handbook isn't comprehensive. The average employee handbook that Schroeder's firm creates is anywhere from 75 to 90 pages long. That includes arbitration agreements, break and overtime rules, harassment policies, and sick leave protocols. I can bet your team members aren't reading these word for word, so make sure to call out important sections with bolded text or highlighted boxes. Consider using multimedia elements like photos, videos, or graphics to help these sections stand out. Platforms like ArrowUp Training turn restaurant training into engaging courses to match different learning styles, speed up onboarding, and help employees retain information.
No one reads the handbook. The question that you really have to ask yourself is, are there things that we really want to communicate in the handbook that we want them to read that really matters? And how are we highlighting those out or bringing those out separately? What's really great is if you can get an employee on camera to tell a story of why they feel welcomed being whomever they are in the company.
5. You don't have buy-in from managers. Get managers and shift leads involved in creating the employee handbook. Maybe not the legal stuff, but get their input on things like your company culture and your values. Make sure the people who are on the floor understand what's in the handbook and why it's there. Want to see more helpful guidance for your restaurant business? Subscribe to the 7 Shifts channel for tips and stories from real restaurant people. Now let's go through what you should include in your handbook section by section, from tip pooling policies to meals and breaks. Let's start with the introduction for your employee handbook. Don't dive straight into their responsibilities and roles. Welcome new hires and tell them about your restaurant's story. Write a personal letter thanking them for joining your team and explain your mission statement, the why and how behind your business's vision. Explain how this new job will benefit them in the short and long term. Set goals so they know how to be successful in their roles. Make them feel like they're part of a team that values them, because hiring is tough. In a 2025 survey, restaurant operators told us that it's really hard to find qualified and committed applicants. So when you do, set them off on the right foot. To recap, in your welcome section include a welcome letter from the manager or owner, your mission statement and vision, and how your employee is an essential part of your operations. It may seem fluffy, but taking the time to set core values and hire people who share those values will reduce turnover and save you money in the long run. If all of your employees know and respect your core values, your customers will get consistent service and your team will mesh better. 60% of restaurant employees say that getting along with their coworkers is a top reason for job satisfaction. If you don't know where to start, write down a list of your personal and professional values. Ask your trusted managers and employees to do the same, and keep refining and revising until you end up with a list of 3 to 5 core values that make sense for your business. Tie these back to your mission statement and vision. For example, Mandy's Salads in Canada leads with 4 values: good vibes, sustainability, quality, and positive impact. Gusto in Atlanta has 5. Give good energy, be a pro, serve each other, lead with grace, and do less better. So to recap, in your core value section, include a list of your core values, why you hire people who share these values, how they create a positive work culture, and how they relate back to your mission statement. In the code of conduct section, outline what kind of behavior is acceptable versus unacceptable. This may be some of your employees' first times in the workforce, so set expectations for how they should treat customers and each other. You don't want to rule with fear, but clearly set your standards and explain what happens if they're not met. Lead by example and make staff feel supported by showing that these rules apply to yourself and others in management as well. What's your restaurant's stance on relationships between coworkers? What about between managers and employees? Many employers have a policy that bans romantic relationships between managers and employees to avoid favoritism and conflict of interest. This section should include things like phone usage, punctuality, acceptable versus unacceptable behaviors and disciplinary actions, work relationships, and leadership's code of conduct. Building on your code of conduct section, clearly explain what is considered harassment and that it will not be tolerated. Mention examples of bullying, discrimination, or sexual harassment, and explain how victims can report these incidents without fear of getting in trouble. Explain the consequences for this behavior. What does an anti-harassment process look like in practice? Aaron Wade, the founder of Homeroom in Oakland, has created the Color Code of Conduct system, where staff can rate the level of discomfort or harassment they experience. Yellow might be an off vibe, whereas red might be an overtly sexual remark or touching. Having that shared language helps managers get involved before situations escalate. Wade told Toast, "What's been so amazing is that we came up with it as a way of dealing with the problem, but what it's actually done is help curb the problem." The government often has guidelines around harassment policies and training, so be sure to refer to local laws. In this example include examples of harassment, both physical and digital, punishable and fireable offenses, how an employee can report an incident, confidentiality agreement, and how management will respond to claims. Next is the dress code and uniforms. Even if your restaurant doesn't require employees to wear branded uniforms, talk about what they can and can't wear to work. A common requirement for safety reasons are closed-toed, non-slip shoes. You might rule out sunglasses for front of house staff. Depending on the outfit you specify, you might need to cover clothing costs. For example, Schroeder says in her area, the employer has to pay for and maintain any clothing with a distinctive logo, color, or design. Even blue jeans can be considered a uniform because they're not black and white. Check legislation to see who's responsible for the costs and what you can ask for. Similarly, you can require levels of grooming in your handbook as long as they don't violate local laws. Some restaurants ban employees from wearing nail polish or heavy fragrances, but you may not be able to prevent them from wearing headdresses or their natural hair. So here, outline what types of clothing are appropriate for your business, a list of items that can't be worn on the job, and reasonable grooming requirements. Hot fire, sharp knives, and tight spaces. No, these aren't my phobias. These are the regular working conditions of many restaurant workers. Prepare your team for unexpected accidents like food spoilage, glass breaking, or burns. Help staff know how to respond in emergencies to keep your team and your customers safe. Cover hygiene best practices, food safety and allergen protocols, safety systems like WMIS and emergency exits, how to respond to accidents and emergencies, and alcohol service, like not overserving customers and transportation for inebriated customers. Operational systems and procedures. I know this sounds like jargon, but basically, how does your restaurant operate? Do you have pre-shift meetings? Do you have task checklists for opening and closing shifts? Which POS do you use? Do employees clock in on the POS or physical punch cards? Are there any other tech tools or apps that you use that your team should know about? Document your best practices here, but focus on references and quick answers rather than in-depth training. Save that for your training manual. Here include pre and post shift tasks for each department, best practices for everyday tasks, and the tech you use, like your POS, your KDS, online and delivery apps, and your scheduling app. Next, go into your scheduling guidelines. Shifts for restaurant workers usually vary, and because of this, over the last few years, we've seen stricter regulation around scheduling. Predictive scheduling or fair work week laws are in effect in many cities, and they specify how far in advance you can send the schedule, extra pay for last minute changes, and the minimum number of hours between shifts. Make sure to check your local laws to get this section right. You'll also want to talk about how employees swap shifts and submit their availability. 7 shifts make scheduling your team easy. Quickly build schedules and make changes on the go. Staff use the 7 Shifts app to check their schedule, communicate with the team, swap shifts, and submit time off. Try it for free today. No credit cards or contracts necessary. To review, this section should outline when and how employees get the schedule, like bulletin board, email, or an app, how to give up, take, and trade shifts, and who needs to approve them, and the process for being on call. Every state has rules around the length and amount of breaks employees get per shift. Find out what applies to your business and outline it here. For example, employees who work an 8-hour shift are entitled to a 30-minute break and 2 15-minute breaks. Explain who sends them on break, how to clock in and out, and where the break room is. If they get free or discounted meals, add the details. So here, talk about what breaks employees get depending on their shift length and employee meal discounts. The part your employees are most interested in is getting paid. Talk about their wage, how often they'll be paid, and the method of payment, like direct deposit or check. Explain how tips or service charges work in your restaurant. Do you pool tips? Do servers tip out support staff? Do they get their tips in cash at the end of the night or on the bi-weekly payroll? How do they access their pay stubs? Through email, a website, or an app? For example, when you use 7 Shifts payroll and tip management, your employees can see their paychecks and their tip calculations in the same app where they check their schedule and communicate with the team. They'll receive their tips and earn wages directly in their bank accounts. Learn more about 7 Shifts payroll here or here. Somewhere. Click. There'll be a button. The compensation section is where you can talk about your overtime policy based on local laws. Also lay out your perks and benefits like health insurance, employee discounts at partner businesses, vision and dental, or 401ks. The 2024 Bank of America Workplace Benefits Report revealed that many employees aren't aware of the benefits that they have or they don't understand them. Use your handbook to really sell the job and all of its perks, and remind your employees regularly to take full advantage of all their benefits. So in your compensation and benefits section, cover how employees are paid, including the method and frequency, tips or service charge distribution, your overtime policy based on local, federal, and state guidelines, employee benefits like health insurance, paid time off, 401k, and vision and dental, and employee discounts. Next, list out any days off and extra pay if you schedule employees to work on stat holidays. If you offer paid time off, detail how that works here. Also include leave policies for sick leave, bereavement leave, jury duty, or military leave. I may sound like a broken record, but you should also make sure that this part aligns with up-to-date laws. Schroeder explains why.
Very few people know this. Los Angeles has a daily penalty for failing to provide an appropriate sick leave policy, and it has no statute of limitations. So you could have to pay somebody in the six figures for not having a compliant, just one person for not having a compliant sick leave policy.
So here include how employees request time off, which holidays your restaurant closes for, and leave of absence policies. In a survey we ran in 2024, 60% of restaurant employees said they would stay at a job longer if there were opportunities for career advancement. Explain how your restaurant cares about your employees' development and the skills they learn. If you have a path to leadership, lay it out here. This section should include things like training and development programs, like sommelier or management courses, learning opportunities, and how and when internal promotions happen. Next, have clear policies around employee termination or resignation to avoid confusion and make sure all employees are treated fairly. Talk about how employees resign and how much notice to give as a courtesy. Explain how your business handles outstanding PTO and returning company property. When it comes to termination, outline the steps that management takes beforehand, like a performance improvement plan. Note who signs off on the decision to terminate, how you will inform the employee, and what documentation you all will need to complete. Reference the law to check who is eligible for severance pay and how much. You can point back to the code of conduct or list out again the types of behavior that could be grounds for termination. To recap, this section should cover both how employees resign and what happens after, and the termination process and severance pay. Finally, end with a statement for staff to acknowledge that they have read and understand the handbook, and a spot for them to date and sign the agreement. Okay, we covered a lot today because your employee handbook should cover your ass. It should be a reference that you, your managers, and your employees can keep coming back to when the unexpected happens. If it feels overwhelming, we have a customizable template that you can use for a coffee shop employee handbook in the description below. But use the template and this video's information as a starting point and not a comprehensive manual. We can't possibly fit every district, city, state, and federal labor law in this video. So please, please, please consult with legal professionals before you roll out your handbook to your team. Rely on their expertise and that of your managers to create an employee handbook that balances a warm welcome with an airtight legal defense. If you made it all the way to the end of this very long video, thank you so much for watching. Also, big thanks to Beth Schroeder for sharing her insights. Schroeder is a partner in the Labor and Employment Group in the Los Angeles office of Rains Feldman Littrell. Find her links in the description box below. If you found this video helpful, hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more on restaurant growth. Want legal advice? We can't give you that. But if you do have a question about your employee handbook, comment and we will respond. Break and over... Subscribe...